Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men. Power Black men. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where my intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. And my guest today is doing just that. I recently ran across a post on LinkedIn, and it began by saying, "From the bottom to the top, the White House." And there was a picture of a brother in a military uniform, and I was intrigued by the post, and I continued reading. And then it said, "After 2 presidential administrations, as a capstone to my US Army career, I'm retired." And I was definitely inspired by his post, so I reached out to him and asked if he would join me on the podcast to share his story. And he graciously agreed. So I am honored to introduce you to former White House medical officer, Mr. Bernard Toney. Hello, Bernard, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing? Thank you for having me today.
All righty, so before we jump into your story, let's start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay, so I was born in Detroit, Michigan, but my parents moved down to Atlanta, Georgia when I was about 3 years of age. So that is where all of my formative memories started. And I was raised in Atlanta until I joined the Army in 1999. And I've been in the Army and just recently gone through my transition and retiring from the military after 21 years. My family is a interesting one. My wife is South Korean. We have two beautiful children, Lauren and Logan, and they're dual citizens, both South Korea and United States. And we have a very interesting life, and we try to enjoy every minute of it.
Beautiful family, by the way. Beautiful family. So let's go back a few years. And what was Bernard like in high school?
I'll tell you this. Bernard in high school was someone who wanted to be anything besides Bernard. I wanted to be the cool guy, but for whatever reason, I didn't have what's needed to be cool, if you will. I had 12 gold teeth, if that's interesting for some of your listeners. And I was a underachiever. I was certainly very astute. I had a lot of potential, but I never exploited that potential in high school. I allowed myself to be a significant underachiever.
Okay. Now, name a few people who shaped you into the person that you are today.
Oh, geez. The list is very, very long. I can tell you that at every step of my adult life, I've always had someone in my corner that's been formative, influential, and pushed me beyond the limits that I set for myself. So a whole host of non-commissioned officers in the Army, Anthony Forker, which is the senior enlisted leader for Triple Army Medical Center in Hawaii. A good friend of mine, Taisha Williams Reynolds, she pushed me to expand my knowledge and to try to promote within the military. I think one of the closest friends that I have now currently works at the Pentagon, and we're fraternity brothers. I'm an Omega man, and his name is Eric Arnold. He's a retired colonel and Chinook pilot, and he's been one that's been, for at least the last decade, pushing me at every moment. When I said that I didn't have whatever the task needed, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So there's so many more people. They all know who they are, but I've always had someone in my corner.
Nice. Yeah, it's so important to have those people that support and empower you to become the best version of yourself. And so it's good to hear that you've had that influence, and based on what you've accomplished in life, it's obvious that they influenced you in the right direction. So that's pretty amazing. So now I want you to do a couple of sentence completion. So complete this sentence. I really love to
travel.
My superpower is
humility.
I am proud of
my family.
Life is
a journey.
One thing I would like to change about the world is
poverty.
If I had a magic wand, I would
eliminate poverty.
Nice. And the future is
bright.
So I wrote a book titled The Cure for Onlyness, a Black man's guide to joy, passion, and purpose. And in the book, I talk about the unique challenges that we as Black men face while being in environments where we're the only person of color in the room. Now, I'm absolutely certain you've had that experience, so I'm curious, how do you navigate through those types of environments?
I can tell you early in life, not well. One thing that you may not know about me is as I was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, I was a part of what's called the M to M program. So that's the minority to majority program. It's a busing program in which they bus minority students to majority schools. That for me was middle school. And that was my first experience after having gone to all of my elementary years in an all Black elementary, being bused to an all white school, and being the only Black face in many of my classes. That was extremely intimidating, so much so that the natural reaction was for me to shut down and fail and not try. That was when I was about 12 years old. The second experience was about 6 years later. When I first joined the Army, I performed extremely well on the ASVAB, which is the entrance exam for the military. And they decided to make me a Russian linguist. And so I show up to Monterey, California, and I am 18 years old at the time. And of course, I'm the only Black face in the classroom, and probably one of the only Black faces in my entire military company, which was about 120 soldiers. And so I did the same thing I did when I was 12 years old. I shut down. I performed very poorly. And it wasn't until I had a person, and I mentioned her, Sergeant Fancher, who reached into my life and said, you can perform and you will be the only Black face many times in your life. So get used to it, be comfortable in your skin, and perform to your potential and exceed that potential, if at all possible. And ever since that moment, I was probably about 21 years old at that point, I've always decided that I'm not a Black man, or other people are, different races. We're all people, we're all humans. And at that moment, I reached into myself without really identifying with the color of my skin, but more so the content of my character. In all of my positions in the military, I've probably been one of the only Black people in the room for the majority of the time.
Yeah, one of the pushbacks I get as a life coach for Black men is me trying to convince Black men to see themselves as men who happen to be Black and not focus all of their attention on their ethnicity and race. And that can be really difficult to do, because we have this attachment to our identities, and somehow it seems like maybe we're denying our ethnicity by saying that. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, as men who happen to be Black, we have unlimited potential. And we must be willing to embrace that idea to understand that the only limits I believe we have are those that we place upon ourselves.
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons why I do this show is to expose men to people like yourself who have that same mindset and who recognize that, yes, I have the capacity to be, to do, to have anything I set my mind to. Once again, that's another reason why I was so excited to have you on the show, because you model that, definitely. Now, as a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I'm always optimistic. I know where I come from. I know that I'm a descendant of slaves and people who did not have the opportunities that I have. And in my life, now I'm 40, I'll be 41 this month, I've seen significant strides in humanity, in America. Despite all the things that we may see on the news and in media, I've seen opportunities present themselves for people who are maybe on the margins of society, and for people who may be disenfranchised. So I'm very optimistic because if you were to look at my starting point in life, where I am now is almost unfathomable. And I share and relish in the fact that there are many men just like me and you that are going to be the beacon, and for a beacon of light and model for all those people who may not know that they have opportunities. For a lot of people, it's hard to believe something if you can't see it. And so now that people have an example of many different opportunities that are out there, it's tangible. It's something that's achievable. And as we develop, and as African Americans, as we excel in life, we're that model. We're that beacon of life for other people. So I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, and once again, that's the reason why I launched this movement, the Shatter the Stereotypes movement, because I love what the organization 100 Black Men say. They say it's what they see is what they'll be. And so we have to expose Black men to people like yourself, people who are successful, because there are a lot more of us that are really doing well than most people believe if you pay attention to mainstream media. So again, it's important for us to have representation. It's important for us to have programs like this so that we can expose ourselves to people like yourself. So now, most of us have had life-changing experiences that changed the trajectory of our lives. And you had an experience on March 24th, 1999, that actually changed your life. Can you share that story with us?
Absolutely. So March 24th of 99, I was 17 years old. I had already signed a contract to join the US military the previous December in a delayed entry program. And so I was preparing to graduate from high school. I graduated early out of Open Campus, which is an alternative school in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was out with a friend of mine, Ivan Gray, and we were celebrating his eventual graduation. And we were on Memorial Drive in Decatur, Georgia. And we show up to a gas station. And it was after a club. It was late at night, probably 1 or 2 in the morning. I can't remember. I can go back and look at the records. But shots rang out. I was in my vehicle. I had a Ford Escort, and I was really proud of it at the time. I had nice rims on it and things like that, and it was my pride and joy. But I started hearing gunshots ringing out, and I started hearing those bullets hit my vehicle. I had bullets go into the engine of the vehicle, into the door, into the front fender. And my friend, Ivan Gray, was in my car. I mean, he leans over. And if you know anything about a Ford Escort, the gear shift is sort of right there in the middle. And he leans over, and I feel something wet. And he's shaking. He's sort of convulsing. Turns out that what I felt was blood. It was pouring down my hand. So I got out of what I would call the kill zone, the kill box, and I drove about a mile down the road and pulled him out of the vehicle. And a lot of my other friends were around me at the time saying, "Don't let him go to sleep." I called 911, and the dispatch operator said, "What's your emergency?" I said, "Listen, my friend has been shot." And they asked a litany of questions that I was not prepared to answer, such as where is he shot, and and things like that. eventually an ambulance comes, and at that point it's already too late. I believe he was dead on arrival for that ambulance. And so at that moment, I never felt more helpless. I had my best friend in my arms, and I didn't know what to do or how to save him. I didn't know, I had no medical background, and so for quite a period of time, I sort of blamed myself. I was like, why couldn't I explain my need to the dispatch operators faster? What could I have done? Should I have driven him to the hospital, being that the ambulance took some time to get there? Nonetheless, his death was a large part of the reason why I entered medicine, because I never really wanted to be that person that was in the care of someone else and not have the ability, the knowledge, the skills, and attributes to save that person if I can. And so that was March 24th. The next month, April 1999, I was shipped off to basic training, and that's when I started my military career.
Wow. Tragic and inspiring at the same time, that event triggered you in some ways to do what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the Army.
Mm-hmm.
When you went into the Army, what were your concepts? Because I remember both of my brothers were in the Army, and they both tried to get me to enlist, and there was no way that I could enlist in the Army. A couple of reasons why. Number one, I have a problem with authority and people telling me what to do. And I knew that I was not the type of person that could just listen to people telling me what to do all the time. Sure. The other reason is I've never had a problem with discipline. Mm-hmm. From a very early age, I've been disciplined. If I set my mind to something, I know that I can accomplish it. So I had those two things going for me. So from your perspective, going into the Army, I mean, what were you thinking about as far as the Army? Was it you want to go to get an education? You want to go to serve this country? What was your motivation other than getting into the health field?
I wanted an escape. I had no plan. At that point, I was again, underachiever in every regard. I probably graduated high school with about a 2.0 or less. I mean, it was just enough to have the grades to be able to walk across the stage. So I wanted an escape. The model that I had was that my father was in the military. So I think he served about 4 or 5 years active duty, and the rest was in reserves. And I saw his uniform from time to time in his closet. But he didn't do a full career, and I didn't have anyone else around me that wanted to join the military. I just needed an escape. So everything that happened thereafter was really more so about, opportunities presenting themselves, people seeing things in me that I didn't see in myself necessarily. But my recruiter, most people have a story about their recruiter lying to them. My recruiter and I are still friends to this day. His name is Terry Daniels, and he saw something that I didn't see in myself. He saw a young Black man who wanted to be a thug, for lack of better words. But I had this innate ability as an academic. I was smart, and he tapped into that. So I needed an outlet. I needed a way to escape my current situation, and that March incident was more than enough reason to propel me into the military. And my recruiter happened to be, at least back in those days, one of the gentlemen that was standing in a high school and recruit people right out of high school into the military. I did not have a plan. It was purely an escape.
So what was the most difficult part about being in the Army?
Much like everything else that I started off with, I believe I was one of 2 Black people in my platoon. I didn't really resonate with a lot of people based on, sort of my background and the way I grew up. Physically, it was very challenging for me. I'm a very short man. I'm only 5'3". In fact, when I was working part-time at the UPS before I joined the military, one of the older gentlemen that worked at UPS with me said, "You're too small to join the Army." So I think physically it was challenging. Being away from home was certainly challenging, and not having anyone that I can resonate with at the time was an extreme challenge for me.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite memories of being in the Army?
So my closest friends have been the guys that have deployed to Afghanistan with me. I've deployed to Afghanistan 3 times. And in the harshest of conditions in life, that's when you forge the closest relationships. And so, ironically, it was during those times that I was with guys that were facing death in many situations, but we all saw a way to see some humor in things, to cherish the time that we had together, and we still remain very, very close friends to this day.
So, as a man who happens to be Black and someone who has served this country honorably, I'd like to get your personal opinion regarding whether or not Colin Kaepernick's protest was disrespecting this country and the flag.
That was a very interesting time for me. I would say that the symbols mean different things for different people. I understand what his position was at the time. And I empathize with that position and many others who share that same sentiment. I would say that I fought under the flag, and I fought under the flag with people who didn't look like me. And one of the things that resonates with me is the fact that when I was, in a firefight in Afghanistan, in Kandahar, 2004, 2005, no one thought about color. No one thought about where did you come from? What is your background? We all were a band of brothers, and we were there to get each other out of those situations. And it was under that flag. And I remember seeing that flag flying above our vehicle as we were engaging the enemy. So for me, the flag is freedom. The flag is fighting for the rights and the liberation and the liberties that we share today. For me, the flag was the less than 1% that serves in the military, and we did it under the most extreme of circumstances. But I understand that symbol is different for me because of different lived experiences. So I certainly empathize with people who may have a different position on the flag and choosing not to stand during the national anthem and when the flag is waving.
Great response, great response. Now, I saw a picture of you standing in front of the podium at the United Nations, if I remember correctly. What were you doing there?
Oh, I was actually on a presidential trip for it's called UNGA, United Nations General Assembly. So I had the opportunity. Part of my work is I used to do advanced medical assessments and medical contingency plans. And so I've always been one that has been enamored by the United Nations, simply because the goal, is to rid humanity of many of the scourges and the problems that affect the world writ large. We have challenges in the United States, but about 1 billion people or so live under $2 a day. And so I'm very impressed, and remain so, for the work that the United Nations does around the world.
Now, I want to read off a few of your credentials, just to kind of give the audience a little background about Mr. Toney here. It says, let's see, Associate of Arts, Defense Language Institute, Foreign Language Center. French study, you studied French?
I was a French linguist for Special Forces for about 4 years.
Wow. And let's see, you have a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Fayetteville State University. You have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Nebraska Medical Center. You have a master's degree, physician assistant studies at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Let's see, U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, Doctor of Medical Science, University of Lynchburg. Let's see, graduate certificate, Global Health and Global Health Engagement from Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, Master of Public Health, the George Washington University, and the list goes on and on and on. So you obviously have all the credentials. Very, very impressive. So now my question is, how did you end up getting to the White House?
Models. So when I was in Hawaii and I was doing my clinical training in Hawaii, my supervisor at the time was a Stuart Miller. He's on my LinkedIn as well, and he was once at the White House Medical Unit as a White House medical officer, and he just mentioned it. It was in casual conversation that he had that experience. Certainly, there were things that he couldn't talk about because of the national security element of it. but I was very intrigued by the fact that there's an opportunity for us to serve at the White House. After I did my clinical training, I moved to South Korea, and then I served there, and I came back to Hawaii once again for about 3 years. But the White House never left my mind. Moved back to South Korea once again with my wife at this time, and the opportunity presented itself. One of my colleagues, Travis Kaufman, when we were in Hawaii, left our clinic, our organization, to go to the White House, and that was the second exposure to the fact that it's an opportunity. I got to Korea, and I decided to apply. The application process was very interesting. It was rigorous. It was very competitive. It's a nominative sort of position, and I did everything that I needed to do to jump through all those hoops and hurdles to get to Washington, D.C. and interview. I interviewed well, and they brought me on. Probably some of the things that helped me out was I always had a top secret security clearance from my first day in the military, essentially, as a linguist. And so that was certainly one thing that, bridged a little bit of trust. But I think really it was a matter of, being able to join a team and being able to see the things that mean success. And a lot of that is team dynamics. And I understood that very well based on my past experiences. And so I served from the White House from December 2018 until just most recently this April.
So what was it like the first time you were at the White House? What was that like?
You're talking to someone who grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and had never traveled outside of my zip code for the most part. And so although I had traveled around the entire world by this point, and I had been in combat and all these other things, it was awe-inspiring to see our nation's capital and to see what we call that grand, glorious, mysterious place, the White House, and to see the work that goes on there, and the passions and how people pour all of themselves into the work that they do there, despite what many people may see in the media and things like that. There is really a lot of people just like you and I trying to do the best that they can to support the office of the president and the office of the vice president.
So what would be your fondest memory of working at the White House?
I would say my fondest memory would be the people. So many of us, we understood that we were joining an organization that was going to take us away from our families, essentially. And so while I deployed many times before, the White House required that we worked tirelessly, and we traveled, and we did it as silent professionals, off of camera, without any glory or awards or anything like that. And the only reason why I even posted my history on LinkedIn was that I was now out of the White House and had moved on. But we do it, selfless service, and I really enjoyed the people that I worked with because they shared many of my same ideals and goals in life, and they were consummate professionals, irrespective of what they looked like or what their background was.
So here's the $1 million question. This is just Michael Taylor's question. Did you get a chance to ride in the beast?
No, I did not. I did not ride in the beast, but Air Force One, absolutely. Marine too. So our job is very unique in the fact that we have a lot of opportunities to move around. But no, that was not my role, to ride in the beast.
I've just always been fascinated by that vehicle. I mean, it's just amazing how it's built. So let's go back a little bit. And so tell me, what were your responsibilities while you were there? What did you do exactly?
Without going into any granularity
Sure.
that would divulge any classified information,
Right.
I did medical planning for the president, for the vice president, for the first lady. And so I ensured that they had everything they needed in all situations that one could ever imagine. I also served as the sole provider for the vice president on many occasions, and a sole provider for the first lady on many occasions as well. Beyond serving our principals, we served and took care of anyone who might be on the White House grounds, and anyone who might travel with us as we moved around the world.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So let's shift gears a little. So you're an expert in health. So I'd like you to speak directly to the Black men who may be watching this interview, because collectively as Black men, we lead the nation in most health-related illnesses and death. And that's a fact. And so I'm just wondering if you, as an expert in health, what words of advice, if you will, what message will you send to the brothers who may be watching this in terms of us being committed to taking better care of our health?
First, I would say that you're not a product of your zip code. Your zip code does determine a lot of things about you in life, but it doesn't determine your trajectory. Only you determine that. And so I would say that I am and still and remain in positions that we are extremely underrepresented. I'll give you a case in point. I'm a physician assistant, doctoral level physician assistant in the United States of America. We are an extreme minority. There's only about 3.1% of the recently certified clinicians at my scope of practice in the United States, 3.1%. That's including males and females. As a double minority in my profession, we only represent about 28 or 29%. So you can imagine that we don't have a seat at the table oftentimes for the people that we take care of. And so I would say that there are a lot of opportunities in life that present themselves. And one opportunity that we all have is to keep ourselves in the best health possible. Health is bidirectional, and so is like many other things. And I'll give you a good example. We'll say health is a bidirectional determinant. If you have good health, you tend to have opportunities to do other things in life, whether it is to play sports, whether it is to join the military, if you will. You have to be in a good health status to be able to do that. Being in poor health, in many ways, is a choice. And so irrespective of the fact that you may not have access to many resources, it's incumbent upon you to learn what it means to live a healthy lifestyle. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a whole lot of money to do so. But I'll tell you that if you're malnutrition, and that can be overnutrition, we have an obesity epidemic in the United States, then you position yourself to have a lifelong risk of a lot of chronic diseases. If you use drugs and alcohol, you diminish your cognitive ability to be able to perform in the ways that you have your God-given talents. If you don't take care of yourself, I think in many ways you won't be able to live up to the potential that you may have. I apologize, I had a call coming in. So I say that health, I really apologize. I will say that health is formative. I am extremely apologetic. I don't know why I'm getting so many phone calls at this point.
It's okay, I can edit it, so don't worry.
Okay, so I would say that health is instrumental in just about everything you can do in life, whether it's your career, whether it's the opportunities that present themselves. I think that is one of the formative things that is a social determinant of how well you'll do in life, and it burdens my psyche, and it hurts me when I see in certain areas of the United States in particular, where we have food deserts, where we have people who are morbidly obese at a very early age, where we have people who are abusing drugs and alcohol, where we have all these things that are deleterious to our overall health. It hurts me because I know that that's a key element of success. Not just my success, but anyone's success. But I would say, like in the military, for example, you have to be in good health. And so that is one element of being able to be successful, at least it was in my life.
Yeah, now, apparently you're in pretty good shape yourself. So I'm sure you practice what you preach. So what are some of the things you do to maintain your physical health?
Well, try to get 8 hours of sleep. You know, sleep 8 to be great. That doesn't always work itself out depending on what I'm doing at the time. Campaign seasons don't really allow that. Deployments sometimes don't allow that. But, you know, every opportunity I can to get 7, 8 hours of sleep, I do that. I try to drink, you know, as much water as I can. I'm African American, and you know, we come from a background where chronic diseases are ripe in our communities: diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol. So I try to make sure that I eat well. I think that's very important, and I exercise regularly. The military instilled that discipline in me in the infancy of my career at about 17, 18 years of age. But now that I'm a little bit older, I recognize that it's extremely important with respect to being able to live on this earth and take care of my family and the people that I surround myself with as long as possible. So I think, you know, those three elements is sleeping, eating healthy, and exercising are very important.
I couldn't agree more. A couple of things I would add, and I'll be 62 this year. And to be completely honest, I still feel like I'm in my 30s. Why?
You look like you're in your 30s.
Because as you mentioned, I get plenty of sleep. I watch what I eat. I'm a huge proponent of exercise. I'm also a huge proponent of meditation. Mm-hmm. And probably most important is something that we may not talk about as much as men, is the importance of having great relationships. Mm-hmm. Being in a relationship with someone that's on your team, in your corner, and just having that no drama connectedness. I can't put enough emphasis on how important mm-hmm. that is to our health. Having that person that you love and you share life with, that's really, really important. Now, speaking of health, obviously there's a huge conversation right now about vaccinations. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to get your professional opinion about vaccinations.
So I'm a person that advocates for vaccines. And if the question is about the COVID vaccine, yes, I absolutely support being vaccinated because I'll give you my perspective on this. As I've spent a lot of time around the world, particularly Afghanistan, one of the lowest income countries of the world, people walk to my aid station where we deliver basic care for miles and miles and miles barefoot. What people would do for basic care is astounding. We have some of the most advanced technologies in the entire world to be able to protect us. If you look at the data, African Americans specifically share the largest amount of burden, if you will, with respect to significant morbidity and mortality related to COVID-19. That's all tied to the social determinants of health. And we kind of touched on some of those things with obesity and chronic disease and the things that made you or makes people more at risk to succumb to COVID-19. Vaccines are one tool in a tool chest, if you will, that we're armed with to be able to protect ourselves. So I think that that is one of the most salient things that we can do is to get vaccinated, not just against COVID-19, but also the other routine vaccines that I recommend that everyone gets in childhood.
Now, one thing that I learned in my own research when this whole vaccination and COVID-19 thing came up was I learned a little bit about the mRNA. Mm-hmm. And how that works. And obviously I'm no expert in this, but one thing that intrigued me was the fact that with some of the vaccinations, they aren't injecting you with the actual virus. No. They have the technology, if you will, where mRNA, my understanding is it's almost like they inject you and it's like you're tricking your body to create the antibodies without mm-hmm. the virus. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that just a little bit? Do you know anything about that?
Absolutely. So the way it works, and I try to make it as simple as possible, but you have messenger RNA, ribonucleic acid. And so the way it works is that the vaccine is not a live vaccine. It doesn't have the COVID virus in it. But what it does is it's when it presents into your body, it makes the antigen or it creates, it creates the antibodies in your body that are responsible to the spike protein that we see on all these photos. If you look in any magazine, and then we saw this, on TV for quite some time. So the way that the vaccine works is it causes your body to create antibodies to the spike protein. The spike protein is the protein that presents itself on, when the virus is presented to a person. So once you have that messenger RNA in your body, you create those antibodies in response to that messenger RNA. Now you have protection, or you have, it's not natural protection, but it's vaccine level protection against the virus when you're actually presented with it. It's much like we would see if we used like an influenza vaccine, although in many of those cases, if you're using influenza, you're using an attenuated virus. But in this case, it's not the virus, it's the messenger RNA that creates the antibodies, and those antibodies are what are responsible for being able to identify that spike protein. And that spike protein is what connects a virus to our cells.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that convinced me to get the vaccine, because I didn't like the idea of actually injecting the virus in me. But when I read that, I thought, okay, so that makes sense. In my mind, it kind of clicked. But I also learned, because I know a lot of people were saying that this is something that was rushed out because of the COVID thing, but they've been working on this technology for some 20 years or so. Is that correct?
Right. So there have been a lot of studies that have been in place for, let's say, for HIV vaccines, which we don't have a great vaccine yet, but that technology was being utilized to elicit the same type of response for other infectious diseases. I understand where people's trepidation might come into play about how fast we do things, but I remind people that human ingenuity is awesome. And if you remember just how fast we created penicillin in response to soldiers, American and British soldiers dying on the battlefield in World War II, we were able to, with a whole of government and whole society approach, create those antibodies extremely quickly and deploy them on the battlefield. And then at that point, we brought them back to the United States to use in normal clinical practice. And I'll be honest with you, in family medicine, I'll have to talk parents off the ledge when it comes to antibiotics. My baby needs antibiotics. My baby needs antibiotics, and we're so accepting of it. But if you were to go back and look at history, you will see that antibiotics almost had the same lightning speed, if you will, of being deployed, in society for mitigation of infectious bacteria. I do understand the trepidation, but the thing that we have to keep in our minds is that there were no shortcuts with respect to the clinical phase 1, clinical phase 2 trials, and phase 3 trials when it comes to the vaccines that we use in the United States of America. We were just able to do it with a lot more rigor, a lot more emphasis, and faster. But there was no shortcuts with respect to safety or anything that might be concerning as far as the vaccine is concerned.
Yeah. Now, in speaking of health, it appears that we're moving toward eventually the complete legalization of marijuana. What's your professional opinion of the effects or the impact that marijuana has on the body?
Well, I mean, it's, one of the challenges that I have with, I'll call it an illicit substance in many ways, is that marijuana is a substance that causes a lot of unintended consequences for people. There are things that people like about it, the way it makes them feel. There are people who say that they can focus a little bit more with marijuana and things like that. But I would say, by and large, is that it has a lot of deleterious effects on the body. Much like alcohol does. And so if you look at, I'll use this analogy, not that I, don't have the occasional glass of wine, but if you look at a lot of the cancers that we have, they're usually associated with two carcinogens, and one is smoking and the other is alcohol. And so I look at marijuana as something in that same vein, where many people might view it as a benign substance. I personally think that it has enough deleterious effects that I don't personally recommend it in most situations. Would you want your surgeon to have just smoked marijuana before he, perform surgery? Would you want your pilot, if you will, to be flying a plane with your family in it, having just smoked marijuana? So I think that people are going to use substances in whatever way that they want to. But I would always caution that there are deleterious effects with respect to your ability to focus, with cognition, with reaction times, particularly if you're in a very skilled profession, and sometimes I would even say judgment as well. So I don't have a position, if you will, whether or not it should be legalized or not. I do know that there are health related risks, and those are the things that I will focus on.
Gotcha. So an important aspect of health that we are just beginning to focus on, I believe, is mental health. And I think the good news is we've started to remove a lot of the negative stigma in talking about mental health. So in your profession, do you address mental health?
Absolutely. As you recall, my first undergraduate degree was in psychology. And before I went to study medicine, I was pursuing a master's degree in counseling psychology. So I think that as a whole patient approach, or a whole person approach, if you will, you can't ignore mental health. There's a lot of things that are, symbiotic and mutually supporting. Back pain and depression is a good example. The isolation that we had over the last couple of years has had a significant impact on people. Military personnel deploying. The list goes on and on and on. So I think that mental health is extremely important, and we're seeing the effects of people not receiving the care that they need in many instances, as you watch things in the news. But I think that we're getting to a point, and I hope that we're getting to a point where it's not stigmatized as much. I know the military, as a microcosm of society, has done a lot to destigmatize mental health care and encouraging people to seek the treatment. The way I look at it is it's much like anything else. If you have acute knee pain because you tore your meniscus on a basketball court, you seek treatment for that. And mental health is no different. If you have depression, you seek treatment for that as well.
Yeah, because one of the things I've in the work that I do, I've come to know that there are only two things that'll cause a man to want to change. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent, which is that inner feeling that something's just off. Mm-hmm. And getting men, especially men, and not just Black men, but men in general, because of the masculine paradigm that we currently live in, getting men to talk about their emotional well-being is still extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. Because I think the three most difficult words for any man to say is, I need help. And so I think it begins with us, especially as Black men, mm-hmm. to move past this idea of carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, mm-hmm. being willing to address and deal with the emotional aspects of who we are as human beings, mm-hmm. and not being afraid to go to therapy, not being afraid to talk about vulnerability, not being afraid to talk about, sensitivity, things like that. So these are things that we as Black men have to address. So it's important mm-hmm. that we have people like yourself and in this show to talk about these things. So I think a lot of times what happens is, as Black men, maybe we don't even know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's mm-hmm. important to provide the insights, if you will, the wisdom to support and empower men to embrace, and I think you used this term earlier, our whole selves. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately that's what we want to do. And it has nothing to do with our ethnicity. Our whole selves is mm-hmm. really more spiritual. And mm-hmm. I think, again, we have to have those types of conversations in order to move forward, if you will, My commitment is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. And if you're going to live an extraordinary life, you got to be willing to do the work. You got to be willing to look within your own heart and mind to figure out what it is that's keeping you from living that extraordinary life. And so through my books, through this podcast, through my shows, mm-hmm. I try to provide insights and information that support Black men in doing that. So as we wind down, I wanted to just kind of touch bases with, now, are you still the adjunct professor of global health at the University of Lynchburg? Are you still there?
I am, yes. I'm a adjunct professor of doctoral candidate students, and I teach evidence-based medicine and global health at the university.
Okay. And my understanding is you recently accepted a position with the National Institute of Health.
That is correct.
And what will you be doing there?
I'll be working with the vascular medicine and thromboinflammation team. So essentially, the things that cause thrombotic events in the body, doing cutting edge research with that team, with the lead or principal investigator out of the University of Michigan. And I'll be working in that capacity for the foreseeable future.
Outstanding. But here's my question. What happened to retirement, man?
Well, so, I feel like, I'm 41. And I have the blessing to be able to transition from the military. We call it retirement, but as long as I have oxygen and blood flowing through my body, I feel like as long as I can give back in any way that I possibly can, I'll continue to do so. I feel like Arthur Ashe's quote, start what you are, start where you are, do what you have, or start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. That's what I'm living up to in my life right now. Is I started where I started. I'm using what I have and I'm doing what I can with that to be able to help people in a multifactorial way, whether it's in clinical medicine or in global health, public health.
Now, with that being said, let's imagine we're 20 years down the road and you've done all you can do. You've done, because you've already done tons already, but what would Bernard be doing if he didn't have to go to work, didn't have to do anything, and you were retired? What would you enjoy doing?
Attracting as many people so I can impact them. I think that my story is like many other stories that people have in the United States, but maybe it's not told enough, or maybe it's not accessible enough. You brought up the point of like mental health and things like that. Those things are great from the individual perspective, but if you don't have access to, because maybe you don't have insurance, or maybe the resources are not, available to you in your zip code, and you have to travel long distances, but you can't travel those distances because you have to make it to work. And, there's so many barriers. I want to be able to create buffers and supports for people that need those buffers and supports. And the way that I can do that is to be able to, one, be a model and be able to tell my story, to show many people that look like me and many people that don't look like me, that the unimaginable is reachable. And that you can do so many things in life as long as you align yourself with people who are moving forward. And so I think for me, I might do some public speaking. I'm thinking about writing a book at this point. Certainly anything I write at this point will have to be vetted through the Department of Defense and the White House and things like that. But I'm thinking about ways to make an impact in many ways, the same way you are right now. Giving a voice to the voiceless and creating opportunities where sometimes people think that those opportunities don't exist.
Well, I don't believe in accidents. I believe in divine appointments. And I believe that our meeting was by divine appointment. And I'm looking forward to future collaborations, because I'm walking hand in hand with you with that vision that you just shared. Because how can we impact the greatest number of people in a positive way? That is something that I'm entirely committed to and something that I've dedicated my life to. So again, I recognize that when I saw your LinkedIn post, there was a part of me that said, I got to connect with this guy, because this guy is doing some amazing things in the world. But like I said earlier, we will be what we see. Mm-hmm. And as Black men, we have to see more positive stories. We must expose ourselves to more positive stories. And so I'm really looking forward to whatever the future brings for us. But I know that we are now divinely connected, and really looking forward to what comes up next. So with that being said, I now want to give you an opportunity just to share your final thoughts with the audience, whatever comes to mind, whatever you feel like sharing.
My final thoughts are simply this. I don't know if you know the famous UCLA coach, John Wooden.
Oh yeah.
But he said something that stuck with me for quite some time. And it still resonates with me deeply today. And he said that talent is given, be humble. Fame is talent is God-given, be humble. Fame is man-given, be grateful. And conceit is self-given, be careful. I have a resume that many people might find impressive, but I think that humility is the most salient thing that I want to convey to anyone who may look at this podcast or look at this interview that we have today. Because irrespective of what you have accomplished in life, and I think that everyone who watches this or sits for this entire hour to watch this is going to accomplish a lot because they're committing themselves to creating a better life for themselves. But it's always to remain humble. My goal in life is to make the next person better and to push the envelope and to push people further than I could have ever gone in life. And I feel the only way that I can do that is to be humble in everything that I do. I also want to open up myself to being a mentor to anyone who might want to reach out to me and have questions about my life or how they can pursue certain dreams, but they may not know how. If I can be instrumental in that regard, I'm certainly open to that. But humility and drive and passion, I think those things are hand in hand. I feel like everyone that may watch this may have a litany of skills and talents and abilities, but they're wasted if you don't have the humility to support those skills and talents. And that's the way I live my life, and I hope that other people will live their lives the same.
Yeah, and I will assert that I believe humility is a sure sign of spiritual maturity, because when we embrace the idea that there is a power greater than ourselves, and you can call it whatever you want to call it. If there's a power greater than ourselves, and our goal should be to work hand in hand with this power to make the world a better place, then we are fulfilling our divine purpose. That's just the way I see it. And
I completely agree.
I definitely see you doing that. So with that being said, if someone wanted to reach out to you, how could they connect with you?
You have my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is open and is public. My personal information, I tried not to give all of that out in open forum, but I'll certainly say reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's the only social media that I have. I don't have a Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or anything like that. Probably a lot of that is based on my classified positions that I've had in the past, but that's a great way to reach out to me if you can share that and share that in the comments. And if people want to be able to reach out to me, I'm definitely open to initiating a dialogue in that form, in that medium. And then if it expands out from that point, then I'm open to doing that as well.
Absolutely. So I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile so people can find you there on LinkedIn. So, well, Bernard, I tell you, time flies when you're having fun, man. It's been a fantastic hour. I really appreciate you showing up. And as I mentioned, I mean, this is the reason I do this show, to showcase and highlight brothers like yourself who are doing remarkable things. So keep shining, my brother. Just keep shining.
I really appreciate the opportunity again. If there's anything I can do for you or for your viewers and anyone that's in your network and circle, please let me know. I'm always available. I have more time now than I had in the past. So I'm amenable to forging those connections and helping people move forward.
Fantastic. So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. Once again, thank you, Bernard, for shattering those stereotypes and showcasing just how amazing Black men really are. You're an inspiration, my brother.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys next episode. Take care.
Bye-bye.